Buff Del Campo here. I've been thinking about something we've been doing, that I've been doing my whole life, at least since I've been about 17 or 18 years old, is putting gaskets on things with gasket sealer, and sometimes with silicone. And some of the problems I've had, and some of the problems as a person that worked on radiators, I pulled radiators apart many times on cars, especially hot rods that had people have been working on them and had heating problems, and they put new water pumps on, and they put new thermostat housings on. And what would happen is they would use silicone, and when you tighten the bolts down, the silicone would squeeze out and make like little pieces of silicone, and all that stuff would circulate through the system. And the smallest openings in the system are usually the heater core, but also the tubes in the radiator. And what would happen is all those little pieces would get stuck in the heater core and in the radiator. And when the radiator tubes get clogged up, the car overheats. So the heating problem, whatever the heating problem is they have, would get worse. And eventually it'd end up in my shop with a heater that didn't work. Usually it's summertime, and the car was overheating. I'd pull the top off the radiator, pop the tank off, and there'd be all these little blue things, or red, usually blue. The blue silicone tends to break loose real easy. Be all these little blue fingers sticking up out of the tubes, and the radiator would be almost 100% clogged. And the reason is something like this: somebody goes to put a gasket on it, or no gasket at all, and just uses blue silicone around the where the gasket goes, or glues a gasket on with that stuff, and then tightens the bolts down, and all that silicone squeezes out like this and makes all these little pieces, and they break loose. So what I prefer to do, I didn't bring the gasket over. What I prefer to do is use a product called gasket cinch, which was around a lot. I had kind of a hard time finding it until I found a source. Amazon has it. I think the same product. And now they're not a sponsor. It's just, this is a good product. They, I think Edelbrock also makes an Edelbrock product with the same name, gasket cinch. I haven't tried theirs, but I assume it's the same thing. Somewhere in here we have a water pump gasket, I hope. I don't know where it is. Here it is. So what I do is to put this gasket cinch on, find where the gasket goes, flip it this way. The gasket cinch, the right way to use it is to put it on and let it dry. And then put it on the other surface, the gasket, and let it dry. Nothing will squeeze out when you finish, but when you put this on here, it's real important to let it dry before you stick the gasket on. And then the gasket stays put. Same thing on the gasket. And if you put the gasket on something like a piece of cardboard or something, so you won't get a piece of plastic, it doesn't matter, so you don't get the gasket sealer all over your fingers or all over your bench, which I've done that too. This stuff is wet. Doesn't seem very sticky until it dries. And if you coat both surfaces, let it dry. Make sure you put the top on, because you don't want the whole can to dry. And just let it dry. It's warm in here. It ought to dry quickly. What's the temperature? Oh, it's 100 degrees in the shop. Makes for a nice day in the shop. So this is nearly dry. This is dry. But when you stick this on there, better get it right the first time, because it doesn't come back off. Line up the bolt holes. Get it on there like that. Now it's on there. Easy to deal with. It's not going to come off. If you ever have to, oh, the other thing is, then I take some white lithium grease and I put it on this side of the gasket. White lithium grease will seal in at least in cooling systems with water or with coolant, real well. So you put that on there. You have the surface on the engine or on the front cover, wherever that water pump goes, or on the thermostat housing. It goes on the intake manifold. So when you glue it to the thermostat housing, you make sure the other surface, the one on the intake manifold or the front of the engine, is good and clean. Put white lithium grease on here, put it on, maybe put a little anti-seize on the bolts, and tighten it down. Some time later, when you have to pull it off, or years later, when the water pump leaks or you want to change thermostats, take the bolts out, pull it off. It looks just like this, except it's got a little grease here, and the surface on the engine or the surface on the intake manifold is perfectly clean. You just wipe the grease off. This, you got to scrape it a little bit, but you can do that up on the bench, or you can stick this in a vise and scrape that off. You're not leaning over a fender or over the front of a car doing it. And then you do the same thing again with the new gasket. Glue it to the component with gasket cinch. When you tighten it down, it doesn't squeeze any stuff out. And it's real easy to install it a second time. And real easy to pull it off a second time. I've been thinking about that a lot because we were going over the engine a couple of nights ago, and I mentioned it there, but I wanted to make more of a big deal about it because of the amount of silicone I found in radiators. When you get silicone in the top of a radiator, the car will overheat badly. So, that's it. Have a good day. Bye for now.